Recording started.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. Today is podcast number 502. The date is March 4th, 2020. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today I have my alternative co-host, Tony Foster, and it is a beautiful sunny day today. Tony Foster, how you doing today?
I'm doing simply wonderful, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a very strange March with all the stuff going on with the coronavirus. But as usual, we're doing live stream, so that doesn't really affect us here today. So that's a good thing. On the show today, we're going to be talking to the infamous Kyle Ruddy on PowerCli. Kyle's here on Zoom with us today. So if you want to take a look at him, you can pop over to our YouTube channel and watch us live stream. Hey, YouTube guys, how you doing? We're going to be talking about PowerCli and what's new coming out down the pike with that, as well as some of the fun things that are out there in flings. But before we get to Kyle, we'll just do a little bit of the news. And the news, all we can say about the news is, holy smokes, everything that I know of is being canceled. Because of the coronavirus, we're just canceling all kinds of things. So KubeCon got canceled. The sales kickoff at VMware got canceled. My local flea market where I sell my honey got canceled. We got everything canceled. The meetups, we were running meetups at VMware on campus in Palo Alto. Those are all canceled. So basically anything that gets us on a plane and go to meet people and do things is basically getting canceled. But what does that mean? Well, it means that we're going to be moving things more online. So we will still be doing events. We still will be doing sessions. We still will have opportunities to learn about the new products that are coming out. And I'll just say that, hey, on March 10th, we are doing a big launch. It is an online streaming event, so you don't have to get on a plane to go to that one. And you will get to hear Pat Gelsinger. You will get to hear, Pat Gelsinger, Joe Beta, and Raghu Raghumaran, and one other guy that I can't remember. But all the big guys are going to be out there. Let's see, our old CTO, don't remember his name. But we're going to be doing a launch event. You'll want to see that March 10th. It's going to be an hour of your time, maybe a little bit less. You can come in and do that. We're going to be running those across the globe. So Europe has their own, so look for the sign-ups for those. US has their own, and APJ has their own. They're going to be in language, I believe, with translations and so forth. So definitely look for March 10th. Sign up. Join us on live stream, because I think for the rest of this year, most of your opportunity to learn all the things that are going on in IT from VMware are going to be live streamed. So with that, I would say that that's the big things in the news that I've got. And I'll throw it back to Tony Foster. Tony, you're in central U.S. I know on the coast we're seeing all kinds of things locked down, but that's because the coast, San Francisco and the Bay Area, we're getting a lot of the front. Are you guys seeing this in the central part of the country as well?
So at this time, not yet. It's been great weather here. There haven't been a whole lot of impacts to programs happening here in the Midwest. In fact, here about 45 minutes ago, I got a invite/reminder for the local VMUG meeting.
Okay.
So everything's still fairly well functional here in the heart of the Midwest. I know things have been impacted down towards Texas and up towards Chicago, but most of the rest of the Midwest is functioning as normal.
Okay. Well, that's what I would say. We're definitely at a big corporate land. I'm glad that you're still moving forward with events. I question some of the things that we've got going on. Like even tomorrow we have a team dinner, right? Because people are flying in. Tommy Berry, Josh Millenthal, Jenny Gonzalez, and others are in town for our normal 2020 planning. And we're asking ourselves, can we go out to dinner, right? Like, can we take 10 people out to dinner and to engage? I think the VMware travel policy is if it's less than 50 people, you can still have the events. Anything over 50 people, they want you to cancel it. So it's an interesting time, but I think from our perspective, it just means that we're going to double down on some of the live stream stuff. So one of the things that Kripa from the VMware Code program is going to be announcing over the next 2 weeks is the code sessions. We're going to be doing live stream code sessions for the rest of the year. We're going to try to do 7 a month, right? So a couple a week where we actually have the code speakers coming and talking on subjects where we record them. They will be live streamed, but they'll also be recorded. And we're going to double down on just getting the content to people online, because I think getting on planes is going to be one of these things that it's going to get harder and harder to do as we go forward with that. But that's kind of in the news. Thought we would address that a little bit. If you're seeing cancellations, we're sorry about that. If you are local, you can't go to your VMUG meeting, have a dinner. I think you're in good shape. Make sure you wash your hands. I'm not a health expert. That's all I'm going to say about that. But get sunlight and stay healthy. And if you're under 70 years old, I don't think it's going to be a big deal for any of us, other than who wants to get the flu. With that, we'll move on. So on the show today, we're going to be talking about PowerCli and a little bit of the PowerShell release that's out. So Kyle Ruddy, thanks for being with us. Thanks for being on the call. How you been?
Been good. Been very good. Thank you, for having me.
Yeah. It's always great to have you back on the show. Haven't talked to you for quite a while. Why don't you tell anybody that's a new listener, who are you? How long you been at VMware? What do you do? Give us an elevator pitch of who Kyle Ruddy is.
Yeah, so I work for VMware, obviously, in the Cloud Platform Business Unit, which is responsible for vSphere as well as VMware Cloud on AWS. And then within that group, I focus mainly on automation as well as developer technologies and frameworks. So that means that I do a lot of things with PowerCli and PowerShell, do a lot of things with Python, Java, starting to dabble our toe into the water of Go, and some of our other different SDK languages, as well as getting into the automation tooling area of it, with PowerShell DSC, the desired state configuration manager, Terraform, Ansible, and we're basically trying to get up to speed there, so we can help support all the folks who are using vSphere and VMware Cloud on AWS to hopefully automate first.
Yeah, that's sweet. So how long did you say at VMware?
Let's see, I've been here almost 4 years.
Okay.
We're about a month away from the 4th year. The picture
that makes
area.
That makes Kyle Ruddy's beard an old timer, right? If you're here 4 years, that's like longer than half the company employees, right? Or some ridiculous number like that. So, and your Twitter handle.
Oh yeah. Yep.
What is your Twitter handle, by the way? Is it the beard one, or do you have a different one?
No, so I have my personal one, and that's just at KMRuddy. However, there is also the Kyle Ruddy Beard one, although, I don't have access to it. I don't have a password to it. I've never tweeted it. I don't even follow it. So that one is kind of out there having to living its best life all on its own.
Right. That's hilarious. I think I put out there when I tweeted out this morning, I think I added the Kyle Ruddy beard one, which you would have not had any idea that I did that. So your handle is Kyle, KYLEM Ruddy. What did you say?
No, it's just KMRUDDY.
KMRUDDY. There you go. So give him a follow, and that's who Kyle Ruddy is. So thanks for giving us that. 4 years. Congrats. So why don't we talk a little bit about PowerCli? I hear that Microsoft has a new release of PowerShell out. So give everybody the 5-minute. What are we using PowerShell and PowerCli for? Then we'll dive into what's new with Microsoft and the 7 release, and then what are we working on here at VMware.
Yeah, so PowerCli is our set of modules that operate with PowerShell to basically give you the ability to automate all of the pieces in your VMware stack. So we have modules that give you commandlets and functionality to automate vSphere. You can automate and manage Horizon View, VROps, VMware Cloud on AWS. All these different pieces within your vSphere and VMware environment. So you can take all of this PowerShell knowledge that hopefully you already have and easily apply that out there to your VMware environment. PowerShell has been doing some really crazy things here lately. So just today, like literally as of I think 2, maybe 3 hours ago, the blog post went live and all of the downloads started. So now you can access PowerShell 7, which is the latest major release that makes use of their multi-platform offering. Which basically a year ago, or actually at this point a little more than a year ago, they released PowerShell Core, which ended up turning into PowerShell 6. Which allows you to operate PowerShell on Mac OS, so Linux. You can even install it on Windows-based systems as well, and just gives you, the feel of PowerShell across any operating system that you choose to make use of.
Right.
Now, the other really cool part.
Yeah, that's interesting in its own right, in that turned the corner from it being just a Microsoft-only kind of automate, Windows environments to now, hey, this is like a tool for, doing DevOps kind of work, right, where you can control all the infrastructure. Doesn't matter which platform you're on. You can do it on Linux, you can do it on Mac OS, or you can do it on Microsoft, right? And that they pulled that release out, made it its own release, ended up calling it PowerShell 6, and now they're in that release cadence of doing new releases across the platform. Do they actually sell it now because it's separate? Do they bundle it? Is it free? How does that work?
Yeah, it's totally free. It's even open sourced, which is another crazy thing of Microsoft going out there offering something that's not only Windows based, but then also offering something that's open source. It's been pretty wild to really watch the community really adapt to it. At one of the PowerShell conferences last year, I think it was PowerShell Summit Asia there in Bangalore, they announced that they are over the threshold of a 50-50 split of internal Microsoft employees versus community members making contributions into that open source repository, which is amazing. It's spectacular work by the community to really grab hold onto the PowerShell release and just continue to make it better and better. And that's a lot of what I think we're going to see with the PowerShell 7 release.
Yeah, all right. That's
so yeah, but
that is completely turn the corner, and you got to give credit to Microsoft for getting a clue and actually jumping into the compute industry and being a participant instead of just trying to control and dominate everything. So that's awesome. So what's new with go ahead.
Well, I mean it's just new world for Microsoft. When you look at it. I totally turned a corner. It's wild.
I agree, and I think they had to do that because I think in the end Linux is getting enough momentum that if they didn't start playing the way the rest of the industry plays with Linux, they were going to have trouble of their own. It's kind of like us having to need to embrace cloud. If you completely ignore cloud, you're doing it at your own peril because the industry is going to expand and do other things, and you either get there or you don't. And I think this is what Microsoft has realized. It's in their best interest to expand and grow into the industry as opposed to just try to battle it completely all the time. Yeah. So PowerCli,
and you're kind of seeing it with us, with the whole Kubernetes story. Trying to run any kind of workload, anywhere.
Now, did Microsoft?
It's a new time for all these companies.
Did Microsoft choose the number 7 because they knew that this was a big 7 year for us, and so they're trying to they align just for our purposes, right? I don't think I'm allowed to say the number 7 related to VMware products yet until maybe after March 10th, but I don't think there's any synchronization between the two companies on the nomenclature. I think, but.
No, I think if it were up to us, we would like to have seen them go with PowerShell maybe 11, seeing as how we're at PowerCli version 11.5.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. There's no alignment.
Would have liked to seen that,
right.
But it is what it is.
Right.
We'll take whatever we can get.
So getting to PowerCli, we are on 11.5. Right? Was there any, what is in a dot? Like, when did 11 come out, and what are the things that are kind of moving the needle with regard to where we are with PowerCli right now? Would you classify these things as features, as adoption, as expansion into platform? What's the state of the world when it comes to PowerCli, and what have we been focusing our time on?
So when it comes to PowerCli, it's basically all the above. All the things. If there's performance improvements that we can make, we do that. If there's new commandlets that we can add, we do that. If there's bugs or other issues that have come around, we focus on that as well. Pretty much in any way, shape, or form that we can help improve PowerCli as a release, as a set of modules, that's what we do. So this is one of those incremental releases, which means generally it's a smaller version, but we're also releasing at a much faster pace. So if you go back a couple years ago, before we were in the Powershell gallery, before we were doing some of those things of that nature, we were releasing once, maybe twice a year, if the stars and the moon aligned. Whereas now last year we released 6 times. We're able to iterate much faster, get those improvements out. This year I think we're going to be on pace for probably quarterly releases. So we'll get 4 new releases out this year. The 11.5 release, it's been out there for a little while. It's since October, November of last year. We took a big look at a lot of what we were hearing as feedback. So we took a look at adding some improvements for alarms. That's always been one of those big things that you can do a fair amount of things, but you couldn't do everything. So we added 5 or 6 new commandlets around alarm management, which basically allows you to use those high level, easy to use functions and commandlets to create new alarms. We took a big look at content library. As I cover VMware Cloud on AWS, content library is one of the easiest ways to get things from your on-premises environment into your VMC-based environment. So we added 10 new commandlets for content library. This was also one of the first big releases. Since I know we'll talk about REST APIs later, I won't harp on this too much now, but content library was one of the first things that was really offered as a REST API going back to vSphere 6. So as we've started to age out some of our older vSphere versions, in this case 5.5 was end of life. That means that we can now add in some functionality into PowerCli since we're working with version 6.0 and newer. So we added a whole bunch of new things for that. We also bolstered up the VMC module. So now you can do some very simple, straightforward automation methods and operations through PowerCli. You can create a brand new VMware Cloud on AWS based SDVC. Just type in new -VMC SDVC. Super easy. And then we're also taking a look at doing some of the bug fixes that are out there. There were some HCX things. There seems like there's always something going on with networking. In this case, we were having some issues with creating or rather pulling back some information about virtual port groups. If your host, that you're making this call against doesn't have a standard port group, so something weird that popped up there.
Nice bug things.
All kinds of things.
Yeah, so I'll loop back and mention content library, right? So and drill down a little bit on that. So content library is. Why don't you take us through content library and how you would then use it in order to get things up on AWS, right? And then you've built some modules there that allow us to automate pulling things in and sticking them in content library. Why don't you just drill down a minute on that?
Yeah, sure. So content library is one of those things that it's been out there for a while. I don't see too many customers that are actually using it, but it's a really easy way to set up kind of a hosted repository of items within your vSphere environment. So a content library is this thing you can import items into it. These items can be anything from scripts. That'll be important here in a little bit when we talk about new functionalities. You can import ISOs, which is really nice when you're having to mount ISOs to different VMs across your environment, or even getting to the point of templates and different OVAs as you're looking to deploy new VMs and new workload types within your environment. So you can all add these in. It's an object within your VMware, your vSphere environment, so it's already known. Very easy to right-click something and deploy from that. Instead of having to reference something that's on-prem and then go through the process of sending that up to your VMware environment. Then when you get into maybe a little bit larger environments, or maybe you have a test environment and your production environment, you can link together your vCenters through linked mode, and then at that point you can basically start replicating all of the data that's in your content library. So you can upload it in one location. Content library will handle the replication of that to your other vCenter environments. And that's kind of where the VMware Cloud on AWS part comes into play, because the second that you link your VMware Cloud-based vCenter into your on-premises vCenter, then it will start replicating up your content library. So then instead of having to every single time reference your on-prem environment, you're just looking at your local instance. So it's a whole lot faster to deploy things. It's a whole lot easier to deploy things, and at least on my own accord. And now we've added a whole bunch of command lists to allow you to automate this process as well. So being able to import things really easily with new content library item, being able to go back, modify, and do all kinds of things that are just really easy instead of having to go through and either use the low-level functionality of the CIS server module, or being able to go directly through REST.
Right, that makes sense. Do they get into like version control of content in the library, or you just manage that through the script? You keep track of that yourself?
There's source control now.
Nice.
That was definitely one of the things that was asked for, and you'll see it now.
When you say now, we're saying PowerCli 11.5?
In vSphere.
In
so
vSphere.
At least 6.7.
In 6.7. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yep.
Nice. So that's keeping you busy, right? And when did 11.5 come out? When did that come out? And does it work with 7? Microsoft PowerShell 7. What's the compatibility between those? How long is 11.5 out? And does it work with 7 or 6? 6 only. What's our story there?
Yeah, so PowerCli 11.5 came out, roughly late October, early November of last year. So if you think about what I just mentioned about us looking at quarterly releases, hopefully we'll have a release here soon. But it, at the time of release, it was tested against all the available versions of PowerShell. So this is something that we do across the board for a lot of our software offerings, not just PowerCli, but also vSphere and everything across the board when it comes to VMware products, is that we test it against the things that are out at that point in time. So when I say that, it's been tested against PowerShell 5.1, PowerShell 5, PowerShell 6, but at that point in time, PowerShell 7, I think, was maybe in, I think it was probably preview, maybe release candidate 1 when that came out. We've done some of our own testing internally, but that's not something that we're going to go backwards and add support to. Whatever the next version of PowerCli is, you'll probably see that support statement come with that. But definitely try it out. Don't let that hinder your look into using or trying out PowerShell 7. But there's already been a couple comments on the PowerShell side. Some documentation is lacking certain pieces for PowerShell 7. So try it out, but it's still in one of those test but verify. So if you have a test environment, you have something along those lines, definitely use it there. And with any, especially major release, definitely check whether or not your resources work the same as they did before, as they do with the current version.
Okay, cool. I'm looking at chat, and I know that question came from chat, so I'll ask a couple other questions that are in chat here. I'll just check through them. Is PowerCLI open sourced? So that's one.
Yeah, so PowerCLI is not open sourced. We do have one piece, which is the DSC resources, or PowerShell desired state configuration resources for VMware, and that is an open source project that's out there on GitHub. Hopefully we'll talk about that here shortly in a little more depth. But that is currently our only PowerCLI based item that's open source.
Okay.
That is something that's been asked for a ton. That is something that's out there on the PowerCLI public feature request page. So if that's something that's important to you, please go out there and upvote that to let us know, where that sits with you.
Okay, cool. Next one is just a shout out saying William Lamb has a public content library for guests. So if you're listening to this podcast, you can go look at that link. It's on virtualghetto.com, 2017-06 new nested ESXi content library. So that's out there. And let's see what else we've got. I don't think any of these other ones. There's support status regarding Power NSX or alternative to Power NSX. What is the status of NSX support in PowerCLI? That's a good one.
Yeah, so Power NSX is a fun one. So that's the community created and supported set of modules to really use PowerShell with NSXV. So there's been a lot of asks for it, and I put in the PowerCLI ideas site. That's our public feature request site. That has definitely seen a lot of updates and votes for that as well. However, so far that's not something that has been committed to from either the product manager side nor from the engineering side. So NSXV stuff is probably going to remain a community-based effort through the Power NSX modules. I see Graham just mentioned NSXT. We do already have an NSXT module that works with PowerCLI. It's going to be a low-level module, so basically you're doing a lot of get NSXT service for that right now. You are going to see a lot more functionality being added to it. NSXT is kind of the networking backbone for VMware Cloud on AWS, and we've been working pretty hard to add some functionality there so that not just deploying and managing your SDDCs, but also being able to make some improvements to the networking for it. So I think you'll see NSXT get some new fresh updates here shortly. As far as whether or not NSXT is going away, I have no idea.
Makes sense. Right. Great questions. And just for anybody that's listening, if you ever are online at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, you can jump on vmw.re/pod and be part of the conversation. We follow chat, and we will engage with people that join us and ask questions during the podcast. It's always been that way. And some people come, some people don't. So always great to have you jump in and ask questions. All right, so that's PowerCLI. I think it's it's something that has been growing. I love the multi-platform support that Microsoft's doing for PowerShell, so that makes it super interesting. When we transition to REST APIs and we talk about me building my web app, I assume that's why we're doing REST APIs. Why don't we talk a little bit about Python and REST APIs and use cases for automation using the REST APIs into our products? And I know that we have a lot of our goals to have REST APIs for everything. To be able to build web apps, I would assume that are doing very similar things. Why don't you take us a little bit through that, and then I'll ask a couple questions around PowerCLI and REST APIs working together. So why don't you tell us a little bit about REST APIs and Python?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been doing, even in vSphere 6, we kind of had a sneak peek of what the future was really going to look like for vCenter and some REST APIs. Out there was content library, and tagging was the other big one. And then along the way, we're basically just trying to get it to the point of making it easy to use our APIs. If you've ever tried to use the vSphere Web Services APIs, this is SOAP-based. A lot of times that the getting started path is really hard. There's this cliff of trying to build up to it. I'll use Graham's term right there. Feeling the pain whenever you use SOAP APIs. So by moving this and transitioning over to REST-based APIs for vCenter is really about usability and a lot about performance as well. So we're trying to make any new feature that's released is going to have a REST API. We're following through with this by as we progressed away from having a Windows-based vCenter and switching over to the VCSA. A lot, if not all, of the management pieces for the VCSA are available through the REST API. So hit up your vCenter URL /REST, actually technically /API, and then it's appliance. There's all of the things that you can do. You can change your root password. You can change the days where your password, when that time's out. You can change your networking pieces. You can do backup jobs. Like that was one of the big first things that was really amazing as far as the REST API and the appliance side was being able to do these file-based backups. If you log in through the VAMI or the vSphere appliance management interface, you're going to have to log in with these root credentials. However, the API allows you to log in with your own SSO credentials through a different administrator-based permission. So instead of having to use your root password and send those out throughout your environment, which is very bad practice, you can now add in this. It's like system administrator or
role-based.
I should know that better off the top of my head, but yeah, following some RBAC-based permission models, you can now use your own SSO accounts to log in and manage the appliance through the APIs as if you were doing it through the VAMI itself. Now, and then we've also kind of moved along onto the vCenter side itself. So we've added new things such as VCHA or vCenter Server High Availability Mode. That's available as a REST API. We've done a lot of the configurations that you can do for VM management as well. Now, one of the examples that I always like to talk about here is creating a VM. Like if you've gone through and created a VM through the web UI, there's quite a few options that you can go through and set. We're talking what the guest OS is. We're talking CD-ROMs. Floppy drives, all kinds of craziness. There are so many different options that if you're new to a vCenter environment, it's kind of like analysis paralysis of like, what do I do with all of these things? Well, if you go through the REST API, we'll actually make some of those decisions for you. So instead of having to go through numerous different clicks, or if you're in the SOAP API, sitting down and having to write out, I think it's like 200 lines of code to define every piece of what a virtual machine is. You can limit it down to essentially 3 or 4 lines of a JSON file for a REST call. So we're trying to make this simple. So give it your guest OS and give it where you want that VM to live when it comes to cluster, resource pool or what have you, what folder it should live in, and then what data store it should live in, and then boom. So this isn't about just simplicity, but it's also about trying to make it a whole lot easier to use and a whole lot more performant as well.
Okay, that makes sense. And so, we're moving forward with REST APIs. Clearly, when we're talking language support, Python or Go or others, what does that mean? If I have REST APIs, I assume I can just use them in whatever language I want. When we talk about doing Python support or Go support, what do you mean by that?
Correct. So, one of the other glorious pieces about a REST API is that, any language that has built-in REST support can make use of these REST APIs. So there's no additional tooling that's required. You just have to know how that language in particular operates against REST API. Now, on top of that, we're also doing these things known as SDKs, or software development kits. And these are, very similar to like what PowerCli is to PowerShell. These are extensions to whatever native language that you want to be in. So, for example, we make vSphere automation SDKs is what they're called. And so that's Python, that's Ruby, we have Java, we have .NET, we even have Perl, and we even have one for REST, which is, essentially a JavaScript and a Postman collection. So Postman's just a REST client. You import in your Postman collection, and then you have a nice friendly UI that you can sit there and make programmatic REST API calls with. Now, all of these things are, when it comes down to support, these are things that we've created. However, they are also open sourced, which is another really cool thing that we're also starting to dabble in and work forward in. So we have a bunch of people who are out there who are making contributions, who are making improvements. One of the really cool things when you mentioned Python is that it was actually a community contribution that took us away from a subpar manner of installing the Python SDK, the vSphere automation SDK for Python, and improved it to the point that we can now use pip, or your pip installer, basically,
right.
Python-based installer,
right.
And point it out to GitHub repo. It pulls everything down and does the complete installation process for you. So, that was a community contribution. Shout out to them for all the work that it took to make that function properly. But then these things just have all these tools and pieces that make it a whole lot easier to do things like authentication. Like, authentication is probably the worst thing, at least for me. Trying to figure out, okay, so I have either a username and password, and I have to pass that through, and now I have the session token that I have to worry about. How often do I have to refresh my session token? Does it stale or get stale, or does it time out? So on and so forth. And at least for me, the SDK makes that a whole lot easier, as well as being able to create the framework for some of the objects. So then I can just create this blank object, and then just start populating each field of that object, to just really simplify everything.
Right. And I know there's repositories of PowerCli scripts that are out there to do various common stuff. Are people sharing source projects on GitHub or other places around what they've built using the SDK or SDKs in each language? Yeah.
So interestingly enough, so PowerCli, we've tried to do a curation job, trying to pull a bunch of things and put them into one central repository out there in GitHub, particularly on the VMware GitHub repo. However, when it comes to Python and some of the other specific language based samples and scripts, we're really just pointing them out to the VMware code sample repository, to the sample exchange. So it's
right.
just code.vmware.com/samples, and out there, it's not just for programming language specific items, but it's also things like, I believe there are some VROps dashboards. There's PowerCli scripts. There's VRO stuff that's out there. There's all kinds of things that you can filter through and search and what have you through, and that's probably been the best area that I've seen as far as collections of some of the more broader programming language based resources.
Yeah, 'cause nobody wants to start code for free, from scratch, right? At least I don't like to do that, right? And an administrator, I don't like to do that. GitHub the VMware GitHub repository has PowerCli things that you can go get, and then code.vmware.com has Sample Exchange, which allows you to slice and dice and search on things. And there are examples out there that people have uploaded, right? Okay, those are two places. When we talked earlier, before we started this podcast, you mentioned VSC resources for VMware that are open source. Is VSC the name of these packages for Python and others, or is that something different?
So that's for PowerShell itself. So what this is it's a set of PowerCli-based resources that are taking and using the PowerShell desired state configuration engine to then apply configuration management to currently your vSphere environment. So that, this is like the kind of the easy button for applying config management through PowerShell and PowerCli.
Okay, so that's
things that
right.
The majority of us already know and love, against your vCenter.
So that's just a bundle of nice things to have for PowerCli.
They're actual like DSC-based resources. So like you can download them from the PowerShell gallery. They show up, if you call like get DSC resources. They're fantastic thing. I believe there was an update this morning, so I think we're going to be ready for a new release of those here shortly as well. When it comes to configuration management for some of the other languages, like Ansible is using Python underneath the covers, so it's using PyVMami at the moment.
Right.
However, we've been creating a couple more resources that also use the vSphere Automation SDK for Python. I believe the content library one that was recently added out there is one that was developed internally and shared. We're working on a bunch of stuff with Terraform. Underneath the covers, Terraform is Go-based. So we have a beta release of the vSphere Automation SDK for Go, so that, which is basically the way that we were able to make that Terraform provider exist. One thing for the people who are listening, the Terraform provider for VMware Cloud on AWS, it's available on GitHub. We are working on getting that over to the Terraform registry. There's still some checks and balances that we're working through with HashiCorp, but hopefully that'll be out there soon.
Very good. Very good. Other things on the list to cover, there's a Fling site. So why don't you take us through what's going on at the Fling site?
Yeah, so one of the extremely exciting things that we've been working on for a long time, and really, this again goes back to the PowerCli feature request site, was this notion of a prior Fling called Onyx. This really easy way that you could basically record all the activities that you were performing in the UI, and then at the end you hit stop on the record button, and it spits out all the code to allow you to reproduce those actions. Now this is something that we've converted and reintroduced to the HTML5 version of the vSphere client, and that's what's known as today code capture. Now, code capture was introduced into the product, fully supported as of 6.7 Update 2. vSphere 6.7 Update 2, I should say.
Right.
So, if you go into the client, there's the Developer Center and Developer Center code captions. Now, 2 weeks ago, we made some additional improvements to the HTML5 Fling, and now you're going to see another older Fling come back to life in the form of Power Actions. Now, for those that don't remember Power Actions, this was a really simple and easy way that you could import scripts into your vCenter environment and then allow other people to really run these in a contextual way. And when I say contextual, I mean like you're able to right-click on a certain object, say a virtual machine, and then out there's going to be a drop-down box that says Run Script. You click Run Script, it's going to show you those scripts that were imported into it, and then you can all of a sudden, boom, run a script against this appliance or run it against this object without ever leaving your web client, your HTML5 web client. So we've added that in. That took a tremendous amount of work. This is another one of those situations where huge shout out to Microsoft again for releasing PowerShell in a multi-platform capability, because we are absolutely making use of the multi-platform version of PowerShell underneath the covers to make this happen. One of the issues with things like VRO and using some of the older script host type configurations was that Windows dependency. And with this, as part of this Fling, there's no Windows dependency whatsoever. It's literally all contained in the OVA, and you just deploy the Fling, and boom, you're out there, you're ready to go. Now, this also takes us back to content library. So content library, easy way to import stuff and then make use of it. Well, this is what Power Actions is going to use underneath the covers as well. So when you're setting up Power Actions for the very first time, you're going to point it out to a content library. Mm-hmm. And that content library is where it's going to import these scripts that then yourself and other users can then make use of within the environment.
That's pretty cool.
So that's a really cool capability.
Right, that is cool. You can define what your scripts are, put them out in content library, and it'll automatically put them up, and you can right-click on an object and get the list of things actions you want to do.
Yep, just like magic.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. There's a couple questions in the chat. Maybe we give it a second, and I got a project-specific question that I'll ask you off the cuff. Will allow us to fire off PowerCli scripts from vCenter alarms. I don't know. Graham asked that, but don't know in what context that was asked. Yeah, so don't know.
So not yet.
The Fling.
That's not something that is built into it. That is something that we're evaluating, something that we're trying to figure out. If that type of functionality is something that you need today and you're okay with using a Fling, check out the Viva Fling that William Lamb and Michael produced. That's been seeing quite a bit of updates here lately, and kind of basically pulls through some of the events and is able to process different scripts based on what it sees, kind of like a event broker type deal. So I would check that out if you need it in the near term. Power Actions and some of these other pieces, let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope that's something that's introduced and possible in the future.
All right. Good answer. The Fluffy Sop asks, any more Terraform providers planned? For example, VMware Cloud Foundation, SCS Manager, or you can read it. You're in the chat.
Yep. So Robert, yes, we absolutely do have a lot more Terraform providers planned. Currently, as of today, we have the VMware Cloud on AWS provider. There's an NSXT provider that's out there. There is also there's a provider for VRA, I believe, as well. And there's one other one that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. But then there's also those are all providers that we've worked on and released. There's also the HashiCorp supported, community supported vSphere provider that we're starting to take a look at and trying to figure out, ownership and updates and that whole process. I'm not certain about VCF. I know we're releasing everything in Terraform these days, so I would have to assume that that's a to come or on the roadmap thing. But if that is something that you're looking for, let me know and I can definitely pass that on. Same thing with vSAN and vVols. I know that's definitely been something that's asked for, and I'm fairly confident on that one that does not exist.
All right. Good answer. All right, I got a Project Pacific, and vSphere, next release of vSphere is supposed to have Project Pacific integrated in. If you're listening to this and you missed the beginning of the podcast, definitely go sign up for the launch on March 10th. Go to VMware.com and just say add to calendar and come check that out. So for Project Pacific, and we talk Kubernetes integration right on ESX, and there's going to be this thing called spherelets, right? Instead of kubelets, it's going to be spherelets. When we're doing automation of Kubernetes, is PowerCli engaged in that process at all from an installation perspective, setup perspective, or any other perspective that I'm just not even aware of because I don't know how any of this plays together? So I'll throw that out to you and go, is there any connection between Project Pacific and PowerCli?
Tricky question.
And if you can't say, you can just say, I can't say, and then we'll just wait till after March 10th. But or you can just say it's a complicated question and you don't know, or continue on. But I'll give you the out that if you're not allowed to say, then just say you're not allowed to say it, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm going to plead the fifth on a lot of this, but I will put out there, if it's something that has a REST API, if it's something that's following the standards that we've put forth internally, that a lot of the other products that are using, there's a really good chance that there's going to be a PowerCli module for it at some point in time.
All right, well that probably gets to the what I was looking for, right? Which is, wait and see, wait for the launch, and because we are offering up REST APIs for everything that's part of our product set. If Project Pacific is there, there's servlets in there. There's a REST API, and then there's probably going to be a release of PowerCli that would offer up that kind of functionality, right? All right, cool for that. Waiting for that. I'm not sure what functions there are, but I'll just have to wait till the mid-March to then bring you back in and ask you a bunch of questions on how I can control my Kubernetes world with the standard PowerCli world that we all love to love. So neat stuff.
Yeah, we may not have a lot of things to talk about then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's nice. All right. So we are coming up to almost being an hour. I think we went live at 1:15, so we have 7 more minutes. And I know we have. Normally, I ask our guests, so what's your plans for this year? What are you going to be doing, and where are you going to be at? But in this case, maybe I'll just say, what are your goals for this year? What are you trying to accomplish, and how can the community help you accomplish that?
This year, you all might know better than me at this point. I know that I'm probably going to be seeing a whole lot more from, in this setting. For those of you that can see the live stream there, probably attending a lot more virtual events, which, is, on the one hand, very nice because you can access a whole lot more virtual events than you can in-person events. But, that always takes away a little bit of the community and the building effort of that. So there's going to be a lot of work to overcome some of those things.
Right.
But one of the things that I was looking forward to that they announced was postponed today was KubeCon Europe in Amsterdam. So that hopefully they've announced that they're trying to take a look at doing that in the July August timeframe. So hopefully that's something that you'll see some involvement in. You'll definitely see me at a lot of PowerShell based events. Fingers crossed. PowerShell Summit US is coming up in late April. So
good luck with that one.
If it's virtual, I'll be online. If it's in person, I'm definitely planning on being there. We'll see about what happens from there. But worst case scenario, you'll see me a whole lot more on this podcast. You'll see me doing a lot more V Brown bags,
sure.
stuff of that nature.
Well, I know that we're going to
invite. As far as
we're definitely going to invite you to some code ones for sure. So, you will get an opportunity to be more live than in previous times. The other thing that we're going to be working with you on is a VMware Code Wars project that we've got going that will be kind of a capture of the flag environment where you'll be able to go download some interesting tasks. And we're going to work with you, Kyle, to define what some of those interesting tasks are that you go off and write some code and then upload it. You can do it on yourself or a team environment. If you've ever played capture the flag events at the hackathons, in other hackathons, that's how we're going to do the hackathons this year at VMworld, and we're going to have some capture the flag stuff that we're going to work with you on to define some of those activities. You can go write code and then upload it and get graded and be part of that environment. So lots of code opportunities for you this year coming from us.
I like it.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
Yeah. Cool.
And then, community-based, Twitter, obviously the very easy way to reach out. Slack and the VMware Code Group is another fantastic way to reach out. I'm probably more responsive on those two than I am to my email.
Any favorite projects? Any kind of code you're going to think of building? Any one little library you're thinking maybe I'll just write some cute script and upload it somewhere in the back of your mind?
Oh, so many. I think we could apply that to configuration management in general. And doing any kind of piece of infrastructure as code, I think is going to be extremely important, not just today, but in the future as well. So I think you're going to see a lot of that type of stuff out of me going forward. So maybe not one individual script, but maybe how to do that in PowerShell DSC, another way to do it with Terraform, another way to do it with Ansible. I think you'll see that type of stuff that I'll be focused on at least.
Nice. All right. Expanding ways to do it. Neat. Well, I appreciate all your work. I know you're popular with everyone. Everyone likes to do automation. So at KM Ruddy, everybody give him a follow and say hello, and we'll try to give you opportunities to live stream all over the place, because I think it's going to be one of those years. Kyle, thanks a lot for joining us on the show and just giving us a summary of what's happening with both PowerShell from that, the REST APIs, and the PowerCLI. Thanks a lot.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, good. It is at the top of the hour now, so we have 2 minutes left. I will ask Tony Foster if he has anything on the barbecue report. I have one small joke that I can tell about barbecuing, but I'll throw it to Tony and see if there's anything in the back of his mind with regard to some nice barbecuing weather that's coming our way in California.
I had wonderful barbecue weather last night. I got to barbecue some burgers and chicken legs, and I also got to barbecue some chicken wrapped asparagus.
Chicken wrapped asparagus. Awesome. That's very nice. I gotta say, gotta like that. I did a whole pork loin on a grill. It was pretty nice, and then in celebration of this weird March, we got a 24-pack of Corona, and we just had ourselves a nice little Corona barbecue, right? Because got to give the Corona beer some love, because their sales are way off, because everybody thinks if you drink a Corona beer that you're going to get the coronavirus, which is just in tech world we know this isn't true, but everybody can go clink yourself a glass of Corona beer, give these guys some love, so they don't go out of business. And that's the barbecue report. I don't have any other barbecue, but chicken wrapped asparagus. Can't go wrong with that. The weather has been beautiful here, so I'm definitely going to get to it this weekend. The bees are out making honey. Everybody's happy. It's been a dry year in California, and I never did the color of the bay. It's been super sunny, and so the bay, but it's a little bit windy, so it's a dark blue with a little bit of chop today. So that's what we got going in the color of the bay.
I was going to say, I was watching the bay here a little bit earlier, and I was going to say a steel blue.
There you go. Right. Yep. It's a kind of that darker blue with a little bit of a chop because it's slightly windy. We're supposed to have a storm come in next week, so we'll be ready for that. We could use some more water in California, but we're going to get some lunch barbecued up here and enjoy the weather while we can. Thanks a lot, Kyle, for being here. We will be again next week. I think we have asked Emad Benjamin to come talk to us about some of the cloud native stuff. And again, March 10th. That's a week from today. Or it's a week from yesterday, I think. Go sign up for the launch. We'll be talking all about the launch because all the information embargoes that are out there right now, we will be able to talk about things. So it's cool. Until then, have a great weekend and wash your hands.